Hello everyone and welcome to another Atomic Mass Transmissions Live. I'm Will Schick, Director of Product Development for Atomic Mass, and today we're going to be painting, well this week on all of our live streams actually, today and tomorrow we're going to be celebrating May the 4th, which is coming right up. And of course tomorrow is going to be a big day. Dallas is going to be painting a clone Z95 for X-Wing, but today we're going to continue on our work from last week, and we're going to continue painting Black Sun for Legion. We started with the Pike Syndicate. I guess what I meant to say was we're going to continue with Shadow Collective for Legion, but you know, it's Tuesday, I'm tired, everything's going nuts. Summer's giving me a hard time in the booth. She's making all these faces and stuff and like waving. She wanted me to like do a little jig. I refuse to do the jig though, because I'm my own painting person. But yeah, so we're going to have some fun with this. I'm going to show you how I've been painting the Black Suns that you're going to see at Mini Stravaganza on one of the game streams. Spoiler alert. Utilizing the new Army Painter speed paints that we've been using a little bit on the stream, and then of course a lot of our Scale 75 colors. So if you want to kind of capture a similar look that plays off of what you see on the studio scheme, but you want to do it faster and easier, maybe this way will be the way for you, or maybe it'll inspire some ideas of your own. So with that, let's go ahead and dive in and get this Vigo Mortison painted up and going. So the first thing I'm going to do is I've got three speed paints that I'm going to primarily use. I've got Zealot Yellow, I've got Hive Dweller Purple, and I've got Orc Skin. So the Orc Skin is going to be for the face, the Hive Dweller Purple is going to be for the robes, and then the Zealot Yellow is going to be for kind of whatever I want to be yellow that's not gold. I'm also going to be using some of the metal alchemy from Scale, so I've got golds, I've got some chestnut ink and stuff like that. We'll go through all that stuff as we go. Summer's right behind me, so clearly we are re-zooming everything in. And so I'm just going to start with the biggest area first, and that's going to be with the Hive Dweller Purple. So again, if you don't know anything about speed paints, they work with the high contrast painting method. So effectively it is a shade, a base, and a highlight, supposedly all in one coat. I'm going to use my Zenith Prime to make this go even better, and so we're going to get some extra shadows and shading. But you just want to have a really even coverage, and this is no different in any way, shape, or form than what we typically do on our streams. So if you've ever watched Dallas or myself paint, we use a lot of like high contrast washing where we take paints from the Scale range or paints from other ranges and we kind of dilute them down using glaze mediums and a little bit of water and stuff to create a wash. It's effectively exactly what you're getting out of the speed paints. The only difference is that the speedy part for these speed paints is that they come right out of the bottle like this. So you don't have to worry about your ratios or mixing them up. And that can be kind of nice, especially when you're doing this over like an entire squad or a whole army, and maybe you're not going to get it all done in one setting. So it gives you that consistency that you can always count on, because the mixes are going to be very similar, the paint's going to behave in a very similar fashion, and that's, I think, where the speed really comes in, because again, this type of like paint technique here, where we're getting our shade, our midtone, and our highlight kind of all in one go over our Zenith Prime, we've been doing that forever on stream, and hopefully, if you've been watching for a little bit or you're just watching for the first time, you know, we've kind of explained the idea and the process behind the technique to achieve this result. And the nice thing about that is that, of course, you can combine them with the ready-made paint. So any kind of paint that's designed for high contrast work, like these speed paints or others that are out there, you can use those as kind of your base. And then if you want a color that doesn't exist pre-bottled as a speed paint or anything like that, you can use the tools and what we've shown in terms of mixing your own kind of high contrast washes to get those colors in. So for example, you know, Huldra Blue is a fantastic color. I haven't used it in forever. I feel really bad, but somebody stole all the bottles out of the studio and I keep forgetting to bring my own. So I haven't been able to use Huldra Blue in a while, but that one makes an amazing high contrast wash paint. So, you know, we've used that. We've used speed paints. We've used all kinds of things. We're going to let that kind of dry out. I'm just kind of going through and smoothing out some of the areas where I feel like there might be a little too much paint pooling or I want a little bit more. You do have a decent amount of working time with this technique and these kind of paints. You have to be careful though, because if you go back in with like a damp brush, you try to mess with these paints after they've started to dry, like once they get about 40% dry, going in with any kind of dampness is actually going to just pull the entire layer of paint up. And then you're going to wind up with this really weird mistake that you can fix, but it does take a little bit of extra effort and work, because the way that acrylic paints work, or paints in general, is that they lay down that layer of pigment, and if you tear the pigment off, you get like that chip or whatever, then you have to start dealing with the three-dimensionality of the paint, because you're going to have a little bit of a depth difference between your painted layer and your underlayer, and so you're going to have to kind of like fix that so it's not visible to the eye, and it's a whole thing. So the best advice there is, yes, you can work them a bit more than normal, but you want to be careful that you don't overwork them. And if you ever have doubts, just wait and come back later and do it. I think we can actually do a stream on, at some point, we can show this zenith priming technique, because we do have an airbrush now set up in our studio. That was a recent addition as we have been updating our space and moving things around. I know Dallas used it on a couple of the streams previous where he was painting some big terrain pieces. He actually did some airbrushing on stream. So I think we can definitely do a little series or a segment about how you do the zenith prime, but it's really simple. I mean, for the most part, like if here's my airbrush, I'm going to base the entire mini in my dark color, which is typically a black or a really dark gray, and that's just a spray primer. And then you'll just come in and you'll hit it from kind of a 45-degree angle like this with your lighter colors, so your light grays or anything like that. And your goal is to, of course, have the light colors cover the top where light would naturally shine down, and then have your darker colors left in the recess, so that when you do the washes and stuff, the paint is translucent. It's not completely opaque, and that's what makes this kind of painting really work. But all paints have the same properties. They have a different, like each color has its own opacity, but they're almost always translucent. So they're going to show what's underneath. And speed paints or things like that, they utilize that translucency to allow the paint to pool in the shadows, so it gets really dark, and then it stretches across the top so it stays really light, and it gives you these really nice natural highlights and shadows. And zenith priming just kind of like ups that, because you have darker prime in the recesses, you have lighter prime on the highlights, and so that just dials up the natural tendency of the wash to pool and be darker in the crevices than normal. And it can really push that contrast. And when you're doing stuff like this, that's really what you want, is you want to think about like really high contrast. Boop, 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 boop. You can do the same thing without an airbrush, absolutely. You can use rattle cans, so you can use just like basic spray primer. The technique is effectively exactly the same. So you would coat the entire miniature in your normal like black primer, and then using the can, you would come up and you would do it from a 45-degree angle, and you would just do really light sprays across the top and let that lighter color dust across. And so it's a little bit of a different control technique, but you can absolutely do it with rattle cans. And in fact, it's been done with rattle cans forever, before like airbrushing really caught on. So, but the principles, the underlying principles, are pretty much identical. Get your solid dark coat on, and then from the 45 or above angle, kind of come in and just knock out those zenith highlights. And the other thing with zenith priming is that we typically only go two colors. So we do, black to light gray, or dark gray to light gray. Typically we use the Vallejo airbrush primers just because they're easy, and especially in this really wet Northwest climate where rattle can primers can betray you quite a bit because of the moisture and the dampness. The airbrush just makes everything easier. You don't have to wait for it to stop raining, which may not happen for months. You don't have to worry about the moisture and the humidity like affecting the primer layer. So we use the airbrush a lot, just for convenience because of where we live. But if you are in a great position or place and you really like your rattle cans, or rattle cans are just easier for you, absolutely no problem with that. You can do it. And the really nice thing about zenith priming, regardless of what you're using, is you can use multiple layers of different values of color. So you can start with black, go to a dark gray, go to a mid gray, go to a light gray, go to a pure white. And if you control, kind of learn your control as to how, how you're hitting the miniature and your angles, you can actually create even more of a gradation of highlight, which just makes the whole painting process in this way even more stunning and more easy. More easy. Good English. I speak it much. But yeah, you can make the whole process like really good, and you'll see certain painters really rely on that technique and the way in which that works to really just drive up the final product that they're putting out, their final look and the final paint job on the miniature. So there's a lot of places to go. Like any technique, you can kind of take it and make your own and really push it. You can keep it simple like we do, get really great results as well. It's kind of like all what your end goal is, what you want. But if you take your time with that zenith priming and you really push the contrast on everything, you can almost have a fully painted miniature by the time you're done with just a couple of like really light glazes and some washes and stuff. And so it can be pretty neat. For the skin on this guy, I'm just using some orc skin from Speed Paint just to get some like nice color down. This is a really vibrant green. It's actually a little more poppy than I probably would normally want. But it's there, it's in the bottle, and we can tone it back if we decide to do so, either with some washing or we can take some more desaturated highlights and go in. But it's very vivid, it's very pretty. It could work really well. Let's see. Okay, so we're done with all of that. I'm going to switch over to my gold. I'm going to start with some Dwarven gold, I think. So this is just going to be a scale 75, I'm not going to start with it unless I open it, so I should probably do that. Summer, why aren't my paints open? Yeah, that's what I thought. That's just rude. Just rude. Okay. So I'm going to do his big old shoulder patties in gold. You wouldn't necessarily have to do this. We'll see how our coverage goes on this. You could do more of like a non-metallic metal if you wanted to be really fancy. But just in terms of like speed and simplicity and stunningness, we're going to go with a true metallic on this. Because I'm doing this over a really light zenith prime, I'll probably have to do a couple of layers, but that's okay. I know a lot of folks will say, like, if you're going to do metallics, you should go back in and re-prime or rebase whatever's light with a dark, or I could have used like a burnt umber or some kind of like deeper brown. And that's true. I could have done that, and it would have helped the coverage a little bit. But I can also just do a couple of thin coats and then do some washing, and it'll be totally fine. You don't have to go back through and do it. It just can save you a little bit of time and effort. But it also depends on your paints, and I've been working with the scale metals a lot, and they have fairly good coverage. My one mistake here potentially is that I started with kind of a brighter mid gold. And I maybe should have started with like a necro gold, which is a darker, grimier gold. And that would have covered a little bit better. But, like I said, this is just going to become a question of like maybe a couple of thin coats to get it nice and evenly covered. And we have plenty of time to do that because our speed paints have made everything else so much faster. So much more fast. I missed the little like robe stripe thing on the back here, so really quick. come in here. And we'll just knock this in. For the person in chat asking about Maul's new command card that was revealed in the Maul article for Shadow Collective Maul. That's a great question to ask on the rules forum. And then that way you'll get the spot on answer from the game devs. It'll be there for everyone else who has the same question to find. Much more efficient than me giving you my best interpretation while I'm painting up a dude. So, folks asking about the AA5 and the Mercenary card that's been shown off in the upcoming Legion card pack. It is correct that it does not have factions listed in its little like faction icon boxes, and that's because unless you're the Rebels and you're taking the Rebel version, no other faction has access to the AA5. It has a Mercenary card because in things like battle forces, such as the Shadow Collective Battle Force, the force organization chart that is unique to that battle force will tell you you can take X, Y, or Z units. Maybe you can take these mercenaries. Maybe you can take these faction units. Maybe you can take whatever. Everything that is legal for that force to be composed of is listed in the battle force document. So you don't have to have a faction symbol in order to be utilized based on battle force rules. The faction symbol allows you to be taken in a standard, a non-battle force army based on which icons you can work for. So the AA5 cannot work for any other factions. Well, the Mercenary AA5 specifically cannot work for any factions, but that does not preclude it from being able to be used in battle forces that allow Mercenary AA5s. And it's the same thing with the new Maul. So Maul obviously does not work for any other faction, which means he can only be taken in battle forces that allow him to be taken. Of which, of course, the primary battle force that allows Maul to be taken is the Shadow Collective. So that's really important from, maintaining the narrative and theme of Star Wars and being good shepherds and stewards of the IP, that we want players to be able to make interesting and fun sandbox choices, right? The game is about kind of constructing your own narrative in a galaxy far, far away, but we also don't want that to diverge so far. Even a sandbox has walls. That's what makes it a box. So we want to make sure that the rules also promote, a way to play canonically, a way to play within the story, and that there are, limitations and restrictions that also give a nod to game balance and faction balance and all that stuff. So we don't see this version of Maul working with the Empire, for example, or working with the Separatists for sure. A little messy around that collar, but we'll fix that right up. We only see this Maul, and this version of Maul is really only working with and as kind of the master behind the Shadow Collective itself. So that's where he can be taken. And the new mercenary rules and the way in which they work and all of that stuff give us the flexibility and the freedom to do things like that. And as we've talked about a lot on stream and at the last Meet Extravaganza, we talked a little bit about what mercenaries meant for the game and the direction in which things were going, and we've talked more and more about Shadow Collective as it's been coming up closer and closer to their release and all that stuff. This was really a huge galaxy brain moment for us because it opens up so much potential for the future and so many things that we now can viably do without making kind of weird concessions or choices or going in directions that would have been more difficult, you know. For example, if you look at a game like X-Wing, and everything that's not one of the primary factions that we see fighting kind of gets lumped into that scum and villainy grouping. And so that's cool because you get to see characters who don't really fit in to the standard like Rebellion, the Empire, the Resistance, all that stuff. Your Cad Banes and things like that. They get to exist in the game and they have like a place and rules that govern their army building and stuff so that the game remains balanced and fair. But those big catch-all buckets kind of become a little weird because now you can start mixing and matching in ways that maybe move a little bit further away from the continuity and canon than we might want or things like that. And so, you know, the way that mercenaries work in Legion, I think, is a really great middle ground because you get all of that flexibility to do things like, say, Ewoks, which would be weird if you could just make an entire rebel army composed of Ewoks and have them run off and fight, because they were never a galactic standing army. But we all want to relive those magical moments from Return of the Jedi, and maybe we want to see what would have happened if in future battles the Rebellion had enlisted some brave Ewok adventurers to go off planet and fight with them as they were mopping up the remains of the Imperial forces or anything like that. And so mercenaries give us that ability to really make very flavorful narrative armies and units and stuff, but also allow players some flexibility and freedom of choice to do certain things, and it kind of all comes together in this like nice little union and group. So that's part of the big fun that we've been able to enjoy because of that. All right, let's see. I need to find a color, not that one because that's a metal. Ideally, we're looking for some kind of purple. We're going to find a purple. We're probably not going to find a purple. There's so many colors, and yet there's no purple. Why? All right, shifting gears. Guess we get a mix of purple. Why not? He's very spiky. He's very spiky. Oh, that's just ink. We definitely don't want to mix that. That wouldn't go well. There we go. All right, so, funny. Put out some of that. I'll just choose to put out some of this. We're going to make our own purple because I can't find purple. Yet another thing Summer's let me down on. Jeez, Summer. I mean, it's whichever monster has just like completely destroyed any organizational structure of these paints over here. They're just everywhere. I should have just gone through a little earlier and been like, okay, what do I need? What do I want? That's pretty good. Magenta-y. A little bit of this like off-white. We'll see what happens there. Yeah, this will work. We can make this work. So basically what I want to do now is I could just leave it as is for the most part and be completely happy with the way the speed paints have worked and all that, but I want to go those extra steps. So I'm going to do his little like button things here really quick. So we're going to do some additional shading, some additional highlighting, all that good stuff. We're going to kind of just play with it and see where we get So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come through with this color, and I'm kind of going to like punch up some of these highlights. And one of the things that you might notice with this high contrast painting and stuff, one of the things you might notice is that that brush is dead. All right, we'll use this one. Is that, you know, you get kind of these desaturated tones because that white is really showing through, so it might not be as punchy as you want. And I like a little bit of more rich colors. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this kind of like new purple mix, and we're going to start adding some real fun highlights and some nice shifts in value and tone, just to make the mini pop a bit more and to give it more visual interest. I've imagined that this guy's probably like surveying his Black Sun nightclub or something. And there's probably a lot of flashing disco lights and things that are going to really make some interesting color shifts on his cloak. So we can kind of play with that wild lighting idea and the way that light would play off of the highlights and the fabric to come up with some visually interesting and neat colors. And again, this hopefully just kind of goes back to show that like every technique builds on another. So taking the time to get really comfortable and learn one thing will help you kind of flow right into the next thing. And everything's like building blocks. So, you know, you get comfortable with your brush control and paint application through using speed paints, and they're giving you these amazingly great and cool looking minis that you can then go play games with. And as you're going, you're like, okay, I feel pretty good. I want my leader though. I want him to feel a bit more amped up. He's already wearing these fancy regal robes, and he's got to stand out a little bit from the group. So let's go ahead and experiment. Let's play a little bit and build on what we've learned or what we've watched. I watched a cool YouTube tutorial, or I watched an atomic mass transmission stream, and they did this crazy stuff, and I want to give it a shot. This is the perfect place to start experimenting with that, because the more unique the Vigo looks compared to the unit, kind of the more natural it's going to feel, because he's already got that big old Savage Dragon head crest, and he's not sporting a blast or anything. Like, he's just there to supervise. So if he looks a bit different stylistically, that's okay, because he should. He should have a different look and feel to him. He should be more regal and interesting. And these are all the things that you kind of get to mess around with. And find those safe places where you can like explore. Character miniatures are great for it in games like Legion. Spend extra time on Maul, spend extra time on Gar Saxon. Give that Darth Vader a little bit of an extra black look compared to your Death Troopers, that kind of stuff. Because you want them to be the stars of the show. They are your centerpieces. And so giving them that extra love in a TLC not only lets you build your skills, it also creates a really cool army with a nice character centerpiece. And I don't want to spend 3 hours working on a unit of stormtroopers, but I'm more than happy to spend like 2 hours, 2.5 hours on a sweet Darth Vader. The payoff is just more there. And for some people, spending 8 hours on a unit of stormtroopers 6 times in a row, that's what they enjoy in the hobby. That's what they want to do, and that's fantastic. Find the things that bring you the joy, and then do them. you know, if 30 minutes per unit and then getting right to the game table is what brings you the joy, yeah, I can't, no one should tell you that's wrong, you know. That's your journey, it's your hobby. Do it your way. For me, like doing these highlights and messing with like the mixes and kind of futzing around with the colors and going too far, making a mistake, hating what I'm doing, going back, like trying to fix it. That to me is like, that's the zen of hobby. This is what I like to do. Getting to this point is kind of the part where I'm like, okay, let's get some base colors down, let's get things blocked out, figure out what our colors are going to look like, and then we're just going to start to play. And that play is the moment where it's like, yeah, let's go. I don't know a ton about Celebration. That's mostly being organized and handled by Asmodee Group and their events team there. We will have demos and stuff in the main hall at the main booth. I know that. I don't entirely know what the like play events look like in terms of their setup. I know that there's some stuff that's going to be happening in a separate section in the main booth on the main floor. But there may be more than that. So we kind of just get tapped in to help with things like, you know, I just helped finish a whole bunch of bases for the demo sets that are going for the demos. And we've done some advising and picked out some of the events and things that like, well, this would be really good given what you're telling us the time span is and what you're trying to accomplish and things like that. But for the most part, those really big shows are largely just organized and put together by the main group. And so I don't have like super specifics on them.
You keep putting your head in the way, but your glasses give like a really magnified view of what you're doing.
All right, well, here, I'll try doing this.
There you go.
All of these really difficult. You know, I feel like this is a you thing, Summer. I tell you, this is where I'm going to paint.
No, you don't.
I do, and then you set up the camera. You're like, all right, we're good. And then all of a sudden, I try to like see what I'm doing, and I get in trouble for it. Like your head keeps getting in the way. Oh,
Our viewers.
well, I don't know if they'll want to see what I'm doing if I can't see what it is. That's fine. I'm over here now. This is why I have you, to tell me when my big noggin's getting in the way. Look, I'm just zoning in. This is my hour of hobby time here. So we're just gonna go nuts. Although I probably need to stop in the purple and get onto the other colors, but I would totally spend the next 40 minutes just messing with this purple. I don't know, whichever one I picked up. It's a size 1 at the moment, which is smaller than it probably needs to be, but the one I wanted to use didn't have a very good point. So you could easily do this with a 2 if you wanted to. And I probably would if I had a better 2. All right, I gotta force myself to stop because I want to keep going, but we got other colors that need some jazzing up, so it's fine. It's fine. All right. But you can see, hopefully the camera is not blocked by my massive melon. And you can see how we took that, that very good looking speed paint like start, and we've really cranked it up through using just kind of our blends and stuff. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the yellow. And normally I'd want a sepia for this, but I don't have a sepia tone, so I'm going to go ahead and grab this chestnut ink, which I totally had. There it is. All right. So I'm going to grab this chestnut ink. That has like so much more than I needed, but whatever. It's fine. I'm going to grab some of this. Some of that. I think I'm actually going to mix it. I'm going to mix it a little bit. So I'm going to mix a little bit of this chestnut ink with some of my yellow speed paint. Just because I want to kind of like lighten it up. Ooh, yeah, that's pretty good. Make that a little bit darker. Oh, I think this will work pretty well. Okay, cool. Cool. All right, so we'll see if this gives us the result we want. And my big goal here is to just push more of that contrast. So the yellow speed paint is good and all, but I don't feel like it really hit all of that neat ribbon detail that's in there. So I'm just going to push the contrast really heavily by using a nice dark mix of this chestnut ink and this yellow speed paint. Another one that could work really good for this, because I want to push this value, this shade really down. Could be like a flesh wash. If you had a premixed flesh wash, that works really well for really shading yellows really dark like this. And then once that dries, we can go back in and we can hit it with some nice vibrant yellow highlights. And we might just get crazy. I'm just going to use this over my gold too. Why not? Because we know we got to shade that gold down as well. So let's just get in there and we'll use the exact same wash on all of that. And that'll provide us a nice little tie-in as well for these colors. Looks like BK's got your question answered about trying to run a regionals event or any kind of like major event. OP at Atomic Mass Games, that's the way to do it. You can hit up old corn dog Courtney, and she will do her best to either get you pointed in the right direction if it's not something that we can take care of or not something that falls within our purview. Again, it kind of depends on the size and scope of the event as to whether Asmodee Group handles it, if their larger team of world-renowned globetrotters, or whether we take care of it ourselves. That's a big old puddle that I don't want. So let's just pull that out a little bit. I guess we'll get crazy. We'll apply it to his big old spiky headdress as well. Why not? Why not? I want to keep those golds feeling a bit different, so. But I think even using the same wash in them, we're still going to get some nice differences in value and color. So I got 20 minutes. I have like all day. So many days to do this. don't even know why I'm stressing. Sure, why not? Caribbean blue. Let's use some turquoise to highlight this guy's green. Green skin flesh. That sounds close to what we used. All right. Do 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 do. So let's go over to here. Put out our green skin flesh. Go here. Get our turquoise. Maybe, maybe not. Reopen the turquoise because it's all gunked up. Dropper bottles. Oh, you're so finicky. And then what else do I want? Maybe we'll try this fall green. Why not? Let's get nuts. Woo! He's going to be a very pretty boy by the time we're done with this. Well, I guess I'm just assuming that he's a boy. Okay. So one of the things that, like, I probably would do if I had a better idea of the random morass of paints that I'm surrounded with is done another wash on the green skin just to get it a bit deeper before I went back in and started highlighting. But we're just going to go straight to the highlights, and we're really going to push. We're just really going to push the highlights on this guy. And that will make the shade of that speed paint just feel much darker than it actually is. And I'm also going to try to pull it away kind of from that orky green and go with something a little more on the turquoisey side just for funds. Although there's nothing fundamentally wrong, I don't think, with that more like fantasy green skin approach for these guys, looking at some of the references and our art and everything. You could absolutely go more natural. Dallas has done a couple of different like painting weird skin tones. And he showed how to get really natural looking results from colors like green skin, and I get that more movie look where it's much more natural and realistic. And that's very, very interesting color theory to look at and to learn. You can find those videos on YouTube if you want to take a gander. But I am going to go for something that's clearly going to feel like it's from an Easter egg. But hopefully, when we put it all together with everything else, he won't feel like a painted Easter egg. It'll feel pretty natural and poppy with these colors. So the hands, the knuckles are a really great place to kind of like test this out, see if I'm like way off, because they'd be super easy to fix if I needed to. But I'm pretty happy with that. I think that's looking pretty good. So we come back in and just hit all those normal spots that you want to really highlight up when you're painting a face. So the eyebrows. And one of the things I really like about the Black Sun, the unit leader and the Vigo heads, they have really chiseled features. So it's super easy to just figure out right away kind of what you naturally want to give those quick highlights to, because they're just kind of like right there. And then of course, if you go off base a little bit or do a little bit too much, keep your secondary brush around. You can blend it right out. cheeks pronounced. Get around his mouth. Yeah. Ooh, that was just a mistake. But we can work with it. Maybe come in and give him a little dome glare, you know, a little shine. He probably waxes his head. He's an important alien guy. You gotta have a shiny dome. You gotta be well kempt, look together. He's not a working Vigo. He's in the meetings. Rule number 1 of Black Sun negotiations: blind your opponents with your shiny dome. Distracted. All right, take a little bit of this white here, mix that into my mix. Good enough. Come back in. Hit those, hit that. Hit this. Just kind of working on his noggin while now desperately trying not to get my noggin in the shot because I've been yelled at. I know I'm going to get it after this too. I'm going to face the wrath of Summer. She's going to be like, I can't believe you're doing that. We don't shoot this in your laundry room anymore, Schick. This is professional. Oh, how I yearn for the days where it was just me in a laundry room. No Summer to boss me around. All right, I don't think I need to go much further than that. That looks really good. Some pretty nice contrast and features. Maybe push that jawline just a little bit. It's really nice. Spot highlights separated away from everything else that's going on. Look at those cheeks. Such powerful cheeks. Yeah. There. Okay. I'm probably not going to hit the golds, but we'll see. So let's go in with the yellows. Woo, that's a bright yellow. It's kind of brighter than I want. Ugh. Why are all these yellows so bright, Summer? Where's like the normal yellows? They're all primary yellows. That's fine. We'll mix. That's what we're doing today, apparently. I started this off thinking I wasn't going to mix that many colors, and now I'm just mixing colors like crazy. So I've got some Sahara yellow, I've got some Soul yellow, and we're just gonna, because if I go in with just the Soul yellow at this point, it's gonna be like way too bright compared to where we are after shading down that speed paint yellow. So I kind of want to get a little bit more ochre into this so it's not quite so stark. Sahara yellow will give me that. I might even go a little bit further. Let's try that. Let's give this a shot. We'll just see. We might have to darken it down a little bit more. Might be okay. Play it by ear here. Oh, that's not too bad. A little brighter maybe than I would want to start if I was going to do a lot of layers, but because this is kind of a smaller area with some really sharp highlights, I think we can get away with it. Being a little more extreme. Because you wouldn't see that much transition on that. on the edge there. Whoop. You definitely wouldn't see any yellow on the gold though. I don't know much, but I know that. There we go. So for this, I'm just coming in with the side of the brush and kind of just dry brushing a little bit on. So rather than trying to paint that line on, I'm using the edge of the brush, the flat of the brush. And it just picks up that edge really nice. And then by using a nice gentle stroke, I can kind of control how strong that line goes on. And this is a really great way to do any kind of like sharp edge painting. Gives you a lot of control over the final. And then I'm just going to come in and I'm just going to kind of do I'm going to do an overbrush. It's not really a dry brush because my brush isn't dry, but it's a really light, 2 hairs and some air, as a famous home painter once used to say. Summer, who was it? You don't know. You're too young. She's not even talking to me now. She just refuses to even like engage. It's so hurtful. I've never been with somebody and yet felt so alone, Summer.
You alienate yourself, sir.
Do I? Is it my fault? I can't help, that I'm a dad. It just changes you. But yeah, 2 hairs and some air. That's what you want. A little Bob Ross classic for you. That overbrush, we're just going to build that color up. And then come in here, same thing. I'm not going to mess around too much. So just that 2 hairs and some air, kind of overbrush just to build up some color in the center. So it kind of matches up a little bit. And then if I feel like my brush strokes are a little too chunky, I can just come in and do a little bit of that 2 brush blend. But I'm not going to fret about it too much because you're not really going to see it from arm's length away, which is where all of our tabletop minis are seen from. And a little bit of that. And then I'm going to go back to my Soul Yellow, add a bit more, and you'll notice I'm not going to his backside yet because if I run out of time, I don't care about the back. That's not going to be the part that people see, so it doesn't really matter. I'm just going to push that yellow contrast a little bit by doing like parts of the lines with a bit more of that Soul Yellow in there. Maybe I'll come in here because it's higher up closer to the face, so I want to lighten. I want to make sure that it feels like it gets lighter towards the face because that will draw the eye towards the face, and that's where we want people looking because it's where they're naturally going to look anyway. So if you paint the face really great, you can kind of just let everything else be okay, and everyone will look at the face and be like, wow, that looks really amazing. So if you're only going to learn how to paint one thing, you're like, I'll master one technique, one thing, and that's it. Then I'm out. Faces. Master how to paint faces. That's where you should spend most of your time. Because if you can paint a really great looking face, everything else just goes away. Because we as people, as human beings, spend so much of our mental effort on faces because the face is so important to communication, to identification, to everything, that even when it's a little tiny miniature, that's what we go to, that's what we look at, and that's what we spend the most time thinking about. So paint the face really great, and everything else will just fall in line. So, and you'll notice, I mean, for the vast majority of stuff, yeah, in miniature design, that face being exposed in the focal point of the piece, super important. Super important. There are times where you can break the rule and hide the face or obscure the face. Cad Bane, one of my favorite examples of this, he's got to have that giant hat. You know, that's the Cad Bane thing. He's the gunslinger. You don't get to see his face. That's what makes him, you know, ominous and dangerous, is that he hides his face. You don't know what he's thinking. You don't know what he's going to do next. So, you know, on a Cad Bane, you can have a big old hat that obscures his face. Or maybe, you know, for the sake of the story or something, or what you're trying to accomplish with the miniature, you can come in and obscure the face. But it's very intentional, and you have to believe in your reason to do it. You know, because otherwise, everyone's going to be like, well, I can't see his face. It just doesn't feel right. And like every rule in art, you know, you can break the rule, but knowing why the rule exists helps make you a better artist, a better sculptor, a better painter, a better drawer. And those faces are premium important to us. So you can use that rule and that human tendency to your advantage when you're painting. Learn how to paint a really great looking face, paint everything else with just some basic old color, and everyone will be like, your paint jobs are phenomenal. And they'll be like, yes, they are, because my faces are great. Okay. It does, and that's kind of the thing, right? Like there are certain characters that, like Cad Bane, his hat becomes so iconic of his look that when you see the hat, you know exactly who you're looking at. So absolutely, that's why he's one of those characters that can kind of like break the rule, where you're like, well, we got to obscure the face because showing the face is actually weirder. But somebody like, you know, even a Mandalorian, Dallas is working on a little surprise thing for a later stream that will come out after Mini Stravaganza, but you'll get kind of a prelude to what he's working on at Mini Stravaganza. So if you weren't going to tune in, maybe you want to. But we were talking about it, and he was going through all these different ideas, and it's this big old hobby project where he's going to do some conversion and some pretty serious work. And he's like, I don't know if I can make all this stuff come together the way I want. And we got to talking about it, and we're like, well, you know, what really is going to define this? Like, what defines these characters? And we're talking Mandalorians, and I was like, well, it's the helmet, right? They don't have a face, but they have a very iconic helmet, just like a stormtrooper. That stormtrooper helmet, you want to see it. You got to see it, because that's where all the character lies. That's where everything else is. And if you can match that helmet to whatever you're doing, then all of a sudden it's like it doesn't matter what the rest of the clothes look like for the most part. You're just like, oh, that's a stormtrooper. That's a Mandalorian. That's a Luke Skywalker, because it's got Luke's face. It's pretty cool how brains work sometimes, and the way in which we're conditioned to view the world and process it. That as long as you got that iconic look, maybe you got a big hat, now you got a Cad Bane, because everyone's going to be like, oh, I know that hat. That's Cad Bane's hat. Heck yeah, Cad Bane. Use the best around. Nama, 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 na. Just going to add a little bit of this gold just to give it that little bit of glint and glisten, make it really pop. Ooh, and then we'll go into these little, I think these are buttons. I'm not really sure. They look like buttons. So in my normal unit of Black Suns, I painted them like buttons, but I don't actually know what they are. All right. So there we go. There is our 1 hour Black Sun Vigo, using speed paints for our base, and then coming back through and doing a whole bunch of highlighting, a little bit extra shading and all of that. But you can see we got a really fantastic end result, really striking looking miniature in about an hour, which can't complain about that. So hopefully this is giving you some ideas for your Black Sun, has inspired you to kind of think about different techniques, combining different techniques like speed paints with normal traditional paints and all that stuff. Pull them all together. So with that, thank you so much for joining me. Hope you had a great time. Be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. Pacific. Dallas Kemp is going to be painting a clone Z95. Till then, I'll see you next Tuesday. Be good to each other, and we'll see you on the next one. Goodbye. Burp, 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 burp.